Hey everyone, welcome back to AI Insights. My name's Fleur Prince, co-host here on AI Insights, and exciting enough, we're starting with season 2. So hooray! I'm here together with Grania.
Hi.
And we're very excited because it's not just going to be us anymore on the podcast. We're going to start inviting guests to talk about what's happening in AI and get you guys all updated every week. And today we invited Giles to join us from Fledger AI. Giles, do you want to
Hello,
introduce yourself?
Giles Slinger, Director of Fledger AI based in The Hague in the Netherlands.
Awesome. Can you tell us what is Fledger AI and who are
So,
you?
Yeah.
so I've been around a long time. I've done about 10 years working in academia on economics and how organizations work with stakeholders. So another 10 years in consulting and about 20 years working on startups of different kinds, always doing B2B software. Working in Fledger, we started off looking at employee contracts and employee share options. And very quickly it became clear that AI was the tool that we needed to help that happen. So we now provide an AI-powered platform which lets lawyers securely interrogate documents, draft documents, and we're putting our money, we're backing for ourselves the functionality of REST-REG, being able to access legal sources and being able to create experts for the lawyers to use inside their firms.
Oh, that's so awesome. We're talking about like AI assistants that are starting to help the lawyers become more efficient.
Kind of, yeah. So I also work with Fledger and I also do law, so that's a pretty cool intersection. It really helps me a lot with all the different like legal work that I do. But yeah, it's basically like think kind of along the lines of like ChatGPT, but it's completely designed with lawyers in mind.
Yeah, that is for me, it's a totally different subject because I've always been more like with the engineers working with AI. So for me, it's like totally different world when I think about law and AI becoming like co-creators of each other.
Yeah.
Because I saw on the website when I was reading through like what Fledger AI does, is a tool called Lisa that you guys created. Is that the tool you were talking about?
Yeah, so LISA stands for Legal Intelligence Secure Agent, and it's pushing down this path of saying inside each law firm there are departments of expertise, and it would be great to help capture those and accelerate the junior lawyers' progress by being able to get into that expertise quicker. So there's some really interesting questions about how you capture that expertise, how you do it securely and safely, and then also how do you make sure that the law firm learns from its own experience of asking the questions. So there's really interesting questions about data sovereignty, what the implications are for, say, European data independence, for each country's law association. Should they be thinking about what the impact is of their expertise potentially sitting outside of their own country, and for each law firm, how it can best learn from its own questions. So I think a really top idea to have in mind here is to say, who is learning from our questions? And ideally, as a law firm, you want that to be you. But the same principle applies across any professional sector. So you could apply this also to engineering, to coding, and so on. Who's learning from our questions?
Is this something that is this like worldwide available, or is it like only certain sectors of the world that you guys are operating with this tool?
So Fledger, I'll show you some of the merch.
Yeah, the awesome hat.
It wasn't going to work with the headset, so I couldn't use it today. We're based in the Netherlands, and we're focusing at the moment on the European Union and the UK, the top markets in the European area. Eventually, we'd like to go further, but we recognize the importance, first of all, of doing a really good job in one market, really proving the return on investment. Because most lawyers at the moment, they want to see, how does this actually help me? What can I use it for in my job? Show me the use case. So we want to start off that way and build outwards.
Yeah, and the platform itself though you can use to discuss like international law, you can discuss American law, etc. So globally available in a sense.
Yeah, because at least how I'm imagining it right now is like it being used if you get like those huge paper drafts of a case, you can just upload it and ask the AI like, hey, what are the most important points? At least that's how I use it for when I upload like papers into Notebook LM that are publicly available to get all the right information that I need to know, like, hey, what's this paper actually about? Is it the same kind of thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah. So if you hear about any interesting case that hits the press, so there'll be a case of social media addiction, a case brought in a particular court, there might be something about an environmental case in the European Union. So you might want to take that case and look quickly at the papers behind it. And that might be 100-page, 200-page PDF. And if you're a journalist, if you're a lawyer, if you're just interested in it, you might say, well, quickly, what are the main issues here? And that's something that an AI-powered engine can do very well and do it very quickly. And you can get back a quick summary of what's in there. And you could just use a public LLM for that, except if you're concerned about confidentiality and security. So the benefit, if you're a professional provider, if you're a lawyer, if you're an accountant, if you're a notary, you want to have something where the firm itself can be confident that you're asking the question on a secure platform, that if it needs to, it can check back, it's got observability, that's the question that's been asked. And ideally, from our point of view as well, that eventually the firm can say, well, what kinds of questions have all of our lawyers been asking? What are the kinds of topics that they need to know more about? So there's actually a whole learning piece and a knowledge management piece that goes into that as well. So same functionality, yes, give me a quick analysis of this, but also, can I learn from it? Can I do more? Can it be done securely?
That's actually a great point to bring up, because I know in my circles as well, data security is right now a big issue, because more people are becoming aware, like, hey, where's my data actually going and on what servers is it ending up?
Yeah, huge issue. And I also think like AI in general is blown up so much. I don't know if you guys saw, but Donald Trump just invested $500 billion in AI infrastructure for America. Yeah, $500 billion is huge amount of money, especially for something so like novel of a topic, So,
yeah, we're talking here about the Stargate project, right?
The Stargate project.
Yeah, that's what it's officially called.
There you go.
Extra 2% on the deficit. Yeah, the accumulated deficit. Listen, the numbers going in are unbelievable, but the other side of those numbers is also interesting. So if you look at some of the recent developments on open source LLMs, the DeepSeek company coming out of China has just offered an LLM which processes data at a 70th of the cost of, I think it's GPT. That starts to ask questions. Well, maybe it's going to be the case that highly capable LLMs are going to be available at relatively low cost, and you may not have to invest 500 billion to get the performance you need. Maybe. And therefore, it then starts to push you down the track of saying, well, what will a professional services firm have in the future? So, for example, would a professional services firm just say, yes, I'm plugging into an external LLM and I get a managed service from that? Or will it be the case they'll say, no, look, over here in the corner, I've got a glowing blue box that throbs every time a question comes into it from our people, and we learn everything that goes on internally. So the question of whether things are kept internal and learned from, or fully external, or some mix. For example, the data set of queries, the data set of answers is kept internal, but the provision of the model is kept external. Those architecture questions, I think, Fleur, from your expertise in an engineering sense, those are going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, we even covered that actually in a LinkedIn post where we were actually talking about also the data security that's happening right now. So I think we were talking this also before we started the recording about the business AI prompt data leaks, where we saw in a recent study by Harmonic Security, where they revealed like trends in enterprises that use generative AI. So we saw like 8.5% of prompts were potentially exposing sensitive data. 45.8% of risky prompts involved like customer data. But we also saw that many employees were like starting to use free AI tiers, but were lacking robust like security features, which was actually a bit worrisome when I was reading that. I was like, oh, it didn't occur to me at first like that people were putting in sensitive company data at all. At least I thought, for me, it's very logical at the beginning when I put in stuff, I don't put in company data because you never know where it ends up.
Yeah, it's a huge thing right now for like every sort of corporation as ChatGPT infiltrates kind of every sector there is, including law, but not limited to law. As this data becomes a more profitable thing and like hackings, ramp up, a data breach can result in loss of millions and millions and millions of dollars or euros, and lawsuits. Like there's extreme real world impacts associated with it.
I know, but I don't know if you guys have this, but a few of my old companies, you would always have like these trainings where you would be taught like, okay, what is phishing, how to look out for it, how to secure your laptop if it gets stolen, what's the emergency number that you have to call. And I find right now in AI, a lot of people are trying to find their way, but there's no real course that shows you like, hey, how can I handle data securely? I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
another
something you've seen that.
absolutely. Another thing is that it's accelerating so fast that it's kind of difficult to put a finger on like where to go. I mean, especially with quantum computing on the
Mhm.
horizon. That's completely like the same way that AI has, turned everything on its head. I think quantum computing will as well, especially in the sphere of like hacking and personal data and leaks and etc.
Yeah, but also that's binary, how do you call it? Binary encryption will soon be able to be hacked, and you can see, okay, hey, what's the messages happening between two people if quantum chips are going to be used for that. But that also tells me like, hey, we're going to start seeing new kinds of encryption also show up on the market that are going to fight this, that are even more secure. So I'm very curious to see how that will develop in cybersecurity.
I think from the AI point of view, there are questions about security and hacking, but I think biggest concern that we've seen people voice when they're thinking about whether or not they should use AI, if they're a law firm, the biggest concern has always been hallucinations. No lawyer wants to lose their license because they've cited a case that doesn't exist. And obviously, the amazing power of LLMs, of ChatGPT, is that it makes stuff up that sounds amazing. Many researchers will say, yes, I looked up papers on a topic and it cited a paper with my name on it, which I'd never written. Amazing.
Yeah.
So what that then says is, if you're a lawyer, what you really need is a system that will tell you, this is something we've been working on, that will give you, here's the answer I'm giving you, here's the document it comes from, you can see the document, here's the section of text highlighted, here's the reasoning, and here's the source reference back. So you've got all the steps, and that comes a little bit towards the whole question of agents. But agents that I've seen so far from an OpenAI, fantastic for booking
Mhm.
restaurants and theatre tickets. I think, the step that we're really working on is the question of sourced reasoning and being able to spell out exactly where the answers are coming from. At the moment, that's very important for professionals. So maybe it's coming next from OpenAI, but that's the bit at the moment we think is important.
Yeah, no, I totally understand also where you're coming from, especially in the work field that you two are working in. But indeed, when you're citing your case before a judge, it's important that your sources are correct. Do you see something like this right now happening a lot in your field where this actually does happen, that people are calling hallucinations or mentioning hallucinations?
Something that I'm really interested to see. So I haven't really heard of like say like there's a hallucination and it's presented to the judge and then it's later realized to be a hallucination. I haven't heard of something I haven't heard of that yet. Kind of what this makes me think of though is kind of the legal questions right now surrounding self-driving cars and kind of conundrum where like if your self-driving car like your technology fails, like who's responsible, the technology or you? I know there's been a few cases surrounding that, like self-driving cars and accidents and who's liable, even like what does the insurance claim on that look like, and etc. So I think it's going to be it'll definitely be an interesting thing. I think it's going to be like its own almost like, kind of corner of law determining liability and, adjudicating those kinds of scenarios. But I personally have not seen that yet, which is interesting. I think it would be happening in America soon enough, especially given the rate that American companies, legal law firms and everything use AI. But I guess it's something that I haven't seen yet, but I'm interested to see what your guys' experience were around it.
So you're wondering
Yeah, if
if
you've heard of anything like
ChatGPT
that.
might lose its license to practice law. That would be,
Yeah,
that
no, hopefully not. Did you see there was something recently where a man was called to court and he used ChatGPT as his lawyer? Not as his lawyer, but he self-represented, which is already like incredibly hard, self-represented, and he won his case and he like everything was explained to him through ChatGPT. It's kind of incredible. I've heard a lot of success stories. I've not necessarily heard much around like hallucinations and, court cases gone wrong necessarily.
Yeah, the biggest challenge that we see with adoption is that if it requires a professional to change their way of working, then that's a big step. And no one studied law for 7 years in order that they could then take another 1 or 2 years to become a prompt engineer. They're just
Yeah.
not interested. The approach that we've taken is we have to provide something that is consumer grade. So it has to be as easy to use as people logging in, people opening up a Google web page and just starting to type in questions. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be transparent in how it gives answers. And that's the minimum requirement. When they then use it inside their workflow, so let's say that you're working on a due diligence, big M&A transaction happening, and you've got to work your way through thousands of documents. It's really helpful to have something that accelerates that process for you. Just deals with the early stage, where can I find the answer to these 20 questions across all these documents? That's a real accelerator. That's something that helps. But if you want to do something more complex than that, you have to make the case. The legal team who already have to work late nights and weekends have not got the mental bandwidth to have anything that's complicated they have to learn how to do extreme engineering on. They just want you to turn up and say, you put your information in here, you drag and drop your document in there, look at the benefit. And anything that will help them go home at 7 p.m. instead of midnight, happy days. But that's the challenge. That's the bar we've got to meet. It's got to be as easy to use that people just say, well, why wouldn't I? I think an interesting way through there is actually going to be through the younger lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping there's going to be a time when people who've just graduated from law degrees are going to be stepping into a law office and saying, can I just help you with this? And suddenly show how things can be done a lot faster. So
that you're not really running around as an associate, going through all the paperwork in the library.
Yeah, well, in America, I feel like that shift has already happened. Like co-counsel, which is kind of their general AI legal solution, there's like mandatory trainings for people that are coming into law firms. Like the bigger law firms, it's a requirement to use it. And that was my experience when I was working in law in South Florida, was that there it wasn't a requirement, but you were almost always going to be using it. It wouldn't make sense not to. It's, same thing that you said. It's the difference between like leaving an hour later and leaving earlier. And then also just getting it done, like efficiency.
I mean, also, I think a lot of people want their family time back as well.
Yeah, especially since post-COVID, I think there's a huge shift towards, like workers really, setting clear boundaries of like, when I go home, like this is my space and I'm not going to think about work, etc.
Grania, it's interesting to hear your experience of having worked in the US system and what you're seeing the change being in people's expectations for training, people's expectations about the use of technology. Are they also therefore using things like co-counsel on university courses? So are people being trained in law degrees in how to use these tools?
So that's a really, really, really good question. It's pretty complicated and it depends on where you are. For example, I have a friend in law school in Boston University, and they're pretty like traditionalist school, if you want to say that. For example, they're not allowed to have laptops in the classrooms, and it's because it operates on like a system of like cold calling. So their philosophy is, oh, well, what if I cold call and then they just Google it or something? Anyway, so there's this huge effort to keep technology out of classrooms, to keep things the way that they were. And so laptops aren't allowed, and you're obviously banned from any form of like AI or whatever. And you're not able, and the trick with co-counsel is that you have to use, I think you need like a law school email, or you need to use your LexisNexis account that's like linked to it somehow. Anyway, they're going to some pretty like intensive lengths to keep AI out of schools. And it was something to the effect of like, you need to log in with your LexisNexis account. If you log in with your LexisNexis account to co-counsel, then they're going to notify your university. Then your university takes disciplinary action. It was, yeah, like,
That's a bit extreme.
Yeah, no. Well, I thought when she said like no laptops in classrooms, I was like, well, that's like saying no notebooks in classrooms. That's like saying no breathing in classrooms. I mean, over here in Ireland, at least for I can speak for my university, everyone, I can't remember the last time I've seen like pen and paper really being used, or at least like it's an extreme minority and rare. And that's kind of just the way of things. But yeah, I think in the future, AI adoption is going to be, kind of accepted in schools. I mean, you kind of can't, I don't know. I don't see how it could be avoided. I see it as inevitable. So.
Yeah, I wonder whether soon people are going to be applying to law firms and saying, by the way, I have gold certificate using this tool or that tool. Or, for example, if there's a benchmark for how quickly you can extract data from a set of documents, now this is my score on the benchmark for data extraction, processing, and summarization with and without any particular tool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually never thought of it. I never thought of that specifically. Yeah, but I can only
But
imagine.
I also use minutes for how it's called Minutes AI, where I like record when I have meetings, I record them, and then the AI makes a transcript, but also notes from the meeting that has been said. Like, so for example, if I said, "Hey, Grania, please remind me to call this person," it will be in my notes. And I can also chat with it, say like, "Hey, what was said in the meeting on Thursday at 2 o'clock?" It will also know, well, you discussed this with Giles and Grania at the time. Make sure to do it. That's super weird, but for me, it made my work so more efficient that I can think of other stuff. I think that's also a reason why I like AI is because it gives you more breathing room.
Yeah,
Well,
that
we've been
is crazy.
impressed. Sorry.
Sorry, that is crazy though. Like there's so much of our brains can be just externalized. Like so much of our thinking can be put onto other.
Yeah, no, that's also a thing. I don't know if you know this, but there was also a long time ago, I think it was Aristotle, who said that if humans started put everything down in books and on paper, they would become lazy.
Really?
Yeah, lazy barbarians. And I'm like,
Oh my
okay.
gosh, he would not be happy with the world today at all.
No, definitely not. But I feel that's the same thing now with AI, that people are saying people will become lazy because of AI. And like, no, we get more breathing room to think of other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the cycle of thinking that the next generation is kind of dumbing down and becoming lazier is apparently accelerating more and more. Now, my 17-year-old son is saying that the 14-year-old is dumbass and lazy, and the 14-year-old says that the 10-year-old is,
That's so
has had
funny.
his brain fried by watching too many short videos.
Really?
Maybe, but they know things about the world that blow me away. They know all kinds of inventions and facts about the world that are more than I've ever known. So they're great. Something I'd like to shout out though for in terms of university courses. You're mentioning things happening in Ireland and in the USA, but Erasmus University Rotterdam has been doing a good job on their Masters in Law and Technology, where they've been experimenting with different forms of technology to try what difference it makes to their students. We went along there and worked with them. Had a sort of showdown. You know, how fast can you get the answers from a set of documents to these questions using different tools? And that I think was a useful and interesting benchmark for companies to try and do, for universities to explore. I'd like to see more of that because I think it's a way of preparing the profession for the future.
Yeah, but I think also for the next generation that's going to enter the work field, if we can do things more quicker and efficient, but in a way that information doesn't get lost, I'm definitely all for it.
Yeah, and if you're a national legal association, I think you then really do have to think hard about what's effectively been a protected industry. There's been a wall around the national legal industry of Belgium or the Netherlands or Spain or Italy or Germany, the UK and so on, partly because of language and because of local customs. And if you're a national law association, you do face the possibility that somebody sitting in Malaysia could give a better answer to a German law question than a lawyer sitting in Frankfurt could, because they've got access through the internet, through LLMs, through the body of German legal knowledge to a better set of answers. At that point, it could have a radical impact on your country's legal system. And there comes a certain point where you start to say, a bit like Google Maps, it actually knows the world's roads better than the national transport authorities do. It actually knows where the traffic problems are, of course. It also knows where, for example, the road probably needs maintenance by the way the cars react when they're traveling across it. And that starts to lead you down a path where, in economic terms, when the value of the product is being partly made by the users who are using it, the more it gets used, the more value is created, the more it generates an IP asset, then it can become the case that the knowledge starts to be owned outside of the normal economic system. And then effectively that normal economic system becomes effectively a digital colony of whoever holds the data.
Whoever
And
holds
there's a really important point that I think, I don't know how much it's being discussed at the moment by different national authorities, but there's an important point that says it may be that users want to go down this road. Users want to choose the easiest solution. Fine. But what do we want to set as being a set of data standards that are kept and owned by the user so that the users could, if they want to, then switch providers? So at the moment, if I want to switch providers in Google Maps, I really struggle because who else has got the history of all those places I visited? But if there are a little packet of all the queries I'd ever had, or if I and all the people in my country could easily switch those packets to a different provider, then we could very easily jump across. And that would enforce a competitive market. And to the extent that all of us believe that competitive markets are basically generally a good thing because they generate competition, they generate better services, better products at a lower price, we all believe in that, great. But once you get a product which generates its own value, it stops being a competitive market. It naturally moves towards being a monopoly. And that's what I think legal professions face. And I think it's really important for software producers like we're trying to be. As software producers, we have to be thinking together with the law associations about interoperability. How do we make sure that people can, if they need to, move from one provider to another?
That's really fascinating. Actually, this links back to something that we discussed previously in the last season of the podcast. We were talking about, and I'm forgetting the details now, but basically it was an ethnic minority in a country and they wanted
The one in New Zealand?
Yeah. They wanted to own their own data and they didn't want to be using, big tech companies and where they didn't have like a say over their data, like especially with regards to their language. So they gathered a team of like engineers and like basically had this. It was like a community effort to aggregate a lot of data so that they could create their own LLM. Yeah, which is really fascinating, and it'll be cool to see if there's like other initiatives of that nature moving forward.
I think we're really going here into the field of decentralizing information. So indeed, what you said, it's not owned anymore by like big corporations, for example, but it actually returns to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least the power to choose, the power to switch. If it's not retained by the individual, then the value is captured by somebody else. And that can be destabilizing for quite big economic systems. And that can be bad for everybody. So if you want a well-functioning technology system in a well-functioning economic and social system, sometimes we have to think about these questions.
Yeah. And especially, I feel like the premise has emerged of digital rights. Digital rights, I feel like, was not a topic, even like 10, 20 years ago. It was all so new, but I feel like digital rights is becoming it's being spoken about, like the UN references it constantly. Surveillance, your image, CCTV, like the right to be forgotten. There's all these new, things coming out, and people's rights with regards to the digital world are being understood in a way that they hadn't before.
Yeah, I think we're really leaning here also into, like for me, I studied communication, so I had a lot to do with learning about portrait rights. So when you use someone's image, you can, for example, as a model company, you need to have them sign a contract that you're allowed to use their face for your campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these huge terms that come into picture it, but I feel it's a lot now coming the same with digital rights, where you were talking about Grania, where people are having to start like, hey, I have to give permission to Meta, to Instagram, to Twitter to actually use my face when they are training their AI models. And because before it was just like, hey, you guys go ahead, but now it's like, hey, my information is being used to train this AI model. Maybe I don't want everybody to know or use my face to create an image on Dolly. That's a lot what you see now coming back.
There's an interesting New York Times court case going on right now. The New York Times is suing, I forget the name of it, but it's the popular like image generation AI. They're suing it for unlawful or copyright breach, basically unlawful use of New York Times images in the development of their model. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and
do you know how it's currently going?
No, I can't say that I do, but the result kind of that court case, I think, will be transformative for, AI just as a field, because it's not just going to be about photos. It's going to be about the rights of the data owners that are, where their content is being used to train these models. I recently published a paper about AI, and I was looking into kind of the development of AI, and I was like, what were the first data sets, or what were that was what are the first data sets, etc. I was looking into it. It's really interesting, like kind of the origin of AI as we know it today comes from, it's called like the Toronto Books Corpus, something like that. And it's basically this series of books published online by miscellaneous authors. And like this collection was the foundation for, modern AI as we know it. And a lot of models like ChatGPT, etc., they're like there's so many layers, there's more and more data, more and more and more and more. But at the very bottom, at the beginning, it was that. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And also, and this is what the paper explores, that's linked to interrogate, because if there's biases in that initial collection of data, if there's biases in data up here in the middle or anywhere in this progression, you're going to have big issues with your final product.
Well, I love the idea that if you ask ChatGPT something, it'll have a strong preference for recommending coffee shops in the Toronto city centre area.
Really?
I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
For fun. I imagine that it might be the case.
Oh, that's actually one of the things that's actually interesting that's happening right now is we were talking about it earlier, but the launch of Operator by OpenAI, where you can give an AI agent a task, like, for example, you're talking about booking a restaurant, and it will actually know your location if you have given permission to it and fully book the table and everything for you. And that's also something what I find interesting, but also for people to think twice about, because you pretty much give an autonomous AI access to your browser and your entire computer where your sensitive stuff is on.
That's terrifying. I feel like there has to be a line somewhere. Something that a lot of people say to me is, why should I care about like my data rights? Like I have nothing to hide, etc. But I feel like it goes so much deeper than that, especially as like AI. I mean, look, 500 billion invested, there's going to be some invent. Like it's definitely going to get like a bit, there's going to be more to consider. Like it's more than just the data. It's what, people can do with it and like your right to yourself, so.
I think this is also a point that comes back when the EU AI Act was created at first, where a lot of people I know from the AI ecosystem were against, like, why are suddenly these politicians coming into our field and telling us what to do? But at first I was also like that, because I also had like, hey, why are these politicians coming into our field and talking about how we should handle data and stuff? But then the more I dove into it, I slowly started to understand, like, it's not about what will happen, but what could happen, and why we need to set some rules to make sure that their privacy is protected.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to see the kind of like how that plays out internationally, the trade-off between data privacy and innovation. Like, for example, in the US, there are very few like data privacy protection, digital rights kind of regulations. And you have a lot of innovation off of the back of that. And then in Europe, I feel like it leans more towards stringent protections, but with less innovation. So it's kind of like compelling seeing how those differences shape the markets. Another interesting thing about America is that the regulations, especially for AI there, are litigation driven. For example, the New York Times suing, like you're probably going to get a lawsuit as opposed to a law. That's kind of like the way I see it there. But those lawsuits are going to be, another thing is that AI is such an international, as much as it varies from region to region, it's internationally accessible. Just like you were saying, Giles, about how, a lawyer in any country could potentially have more authority and expertise in German law just because the information is available. Yeah. It's interesting.
What's your opinion on this, Giles?
I don't have a strong opinion on this. I think where you have regulation, someone compared the approach to limiting AI before you know what it's possible it can do, what you might call the, inverted commas, the European approach. Someone described that as being like the rules once upon a time of having people walking in front of cars carrying a red flag as a way of making sure that cars were safe on public highways. Clearly, the risk is that you then delay the whole industry from developing. And to some extent, the rule that works is not going to be one that we a priori think is right. My rights are this. It's going to be what works, what's economically effective. And if it's economically effective that companies with fewer legal restraints can make whole new business models, which are hugely profitable, which capture value across the world, then that's going to happen. And it's going to be provided to consumers in Europe, even if the European Union tries not to let it. So maybe it's more important then for the European regulators to think not so much about how do we stop things from happening, but rather how do we make sure that if this does go ahead, we do have things like interoperability which make a market exist. So it can be the case that if my data builds up, I have the right to be able to take it and move on to a different provider. So I probably favor trying to make the markets competitive rather than try to stop markets existing.
No, there's a sense of that, but also what I see is that on one side is that rules are also not stopping people of keeping innovating. For example, Hugging Face, that's a Dutch company. They recently just came out with smaller AI models, as they named it. And the cool thing with that is that if I'm saying this right, they introduced small VLM 257, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right, small VLM 500M models, which has like 256 million and 500 million parameters. But they're designed for devices with limited resources that are capable of like analyzing images, videos, and text. Which is pretty cool, but they did that all here in the Netherlands, which I found pretty interesting that despite all the regulations that are now coming in, they still managed to get this off the ground.
Yep, so it's possible. It's still possible. Yeah. We have to make sure that there's plenty of that happening though, because the markets clearly are much deeper funded in, say, the US than they are here. The big thing that I would desperately encourage European companies and government institutions to do is to think about regional and local providers. So, as our first instinct, can we find a local partner to build this with? Because there must be, if I'm the Dutch entity in Groningen, there must be Dutch tech companies in Groningen who, with a 1-year lead time, can build something as good as OpenAI is building now. If you're just prepared to wait a year, it's a really good solution. Technology is moving so fast, but if you just automatically go for whatever's the flashiest thing coming out from a global corporation, your local industry will never develop. And the really valuable thing that big companies can do here in the Netherlands, or government institutions can do in the Netherlands, and the same applies across Europe, is think local first. Who's the partner that's going to be able to build the technology ecosystem that will gradually then provide the resilience inside your country?
I think that's a great quote also to close our episode, because it's, we covered a lot. We covered, indeed, what's happening in law and AI, also what Fledger is producing, which is really cool. I definitely recommend everybody to check out their website and also check out their tool, Lisa. Also, co-counsel that Grania mentioned. If you're in law, because, we all want to become more efficient, and I think especially if you work in the law sector. And we also covered AI agents, the launch of Operator, how AI agents are starting to be used, the impact of it, and also Hugging Face and their new AI models that are one of the smallest, as they claim on TechCrunch.
And Fleur, you shouldn't forget your own work, which is also at The Hague Tech, because at the end of January, The Hague Tech, which is a shared workspace and tech community in The Hague, is moving to its newest brand new shiny offices with event space and meeting space, up to 200 people, offices for tech companies. That's all opening up at the end of this month. I know you've been very heavily involved in making that happen, Fleur. So I think 31st of January is the publicly open Tech Fest day, Friday the 31st.
No, we start on Thursday the 30th with the community day and the pre-opening party. So if anybody wants to join, we still have some tickets on sale. Just to do a little promo myself, but I always try to keep everything a bit separate. But awesome for you to give me a shout out for that. And also THT team that's been working hard to get the move for everybody ready, and who are sweating right now to get it all up and running. That's all handled.
Yeah. And we should also mention the fact that The Hague itself, the city of The Hague, is helping to run the Hackathon for Good, which is happening on the Hague Tech site, I think on Friday and Saturday, even Sunday as well, over that weekend.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Which is a really exciting opportunity, again, for people to collaborate, people like the Hague University of Applied Sciences, TU Delft, Erasmus University of Rotterdam, people coming together and developing something, ideas, and developing connections in their community, which I think is really important. We
Yeah,
need more of
definitely
that,
true.
more
Yeah,
community.
definitely. Yeah, also because we're working with Red Cross and child rights, which is pretty cool for the hackathon. Yeah, also for our listeners to know is that we're also doing a live stream. I will share the link on our LinkedIn page, so you can also join in.
Great.
Awesome. Anyways, thank you again, Giles, for coming on our podcast. It was awesome interviewing you. And to everyone else, thank you for listening and welcome to season 2 of AI Insights.
Thank you.